Okay, so enough of that talking, right? Let's get on with it. The first thing I'm going to do actually is import our usual scale because I really want to know that I'm doing this right here. Okay, with that imported, we see that our box is at a pretty decent scale. We didn't want it to be bigger than our level, for instance. So what I'm going to do first, however, is I'm going to take this box and make it a bit more advanced looking. Because like I said, I wanted to make something that was very complicated looking, but actually very easy to export as opposed to a very complex looking level. So let's go ahead and make it a poly to start out with. We'll change it back to a mesh later. I'm going to select all of these vertices and I'm going to chamfer them a bit. Let's select the top face right here and let's inset that. These are all techniques that I've shown in the last lesson if you're just joining us. And let's go ahead and extrude this up a bit. Now this would actually export just fine because all the things I've done have been just manipulations of the sides, so there aren't any holes I've made or any weird polygons. So let's try to make something a bit more complicated. Let's do this. So there we go. All I did was I added a ring to the top here. And if we do the typical border check, we see that there are indeed some open borders all over this ring I just added. And I'm going to completely ignore that because I won't need to solve these for our scenery. You'll see why in just a moment. The next thing I'm going to do is get rid of Master Chief because he's just kind of in the way, sorry. And add a second part to our scenery. This part is going to be a sphere. Now, for those of you who watched the bonus parts of my tutorial on video, as opposed to the text ones, you would have seen that we tried to make a completely spherical map, and that didn't work out so well. There were certain considerations we had to do for Halo's rendering engine that it really didn't like perfect spheres. However, as I've said many times, scenery gets to break several rules. So we're just going to have a plain old sphere right here. Now I'm going to skip over applying materials to this scenery because it's pretty much the same procedure as applying materials to a level. However, in a level you're going to have to put plus sky, even if you don't use the sky. So if you have a indoor map, you're not going to use the sky. It's all going to be purple and sapien, you're never going to see it, but you still need that plus sky material. With scenery, you don't need a plus sky, so you can go ahead and just give yourself whatever type of material you're going to use for that. So yeah, just apply that, not a big deal. I'm going to convert both of these back into editable meshes. I'm going to select all of the polygons in one and make sure they have the right material. The only reason I'm doing this really is to make sure that there are no errors on exporting, because the exporter will still look for some sort of material to find on them. And you can see that these are set to 2, so I'm going to make sure they're all set to something that's actually defined. With that, I'm going to name these something easy for me to see. Simply top and bottom. And now I bet you're wondering how I'm going to export this. After all, we have 2 completely separate objects, and we only usually use 1 frame. Well, in consideration of the animation we're going to do later on, I'm going to directly make 2 frames, and I'm going to name them appropriately frame bottom, copy this, and call this frame top. I'm going to link the top to the top frame and the bottom to the bottom frame. But I'm not done yet. I have to make yet a third frame that Sapien's going to use as the center point for our entire object. And this we're just going to call frame. The main frame, which is just called frame, should be placed right in the center of your scenery. The reason you do this is because when you place it in Sapien, it doesn't really care what your object looks like. It just wants to know where that point is that you call the center. So if you define it to be all the way 1,000 miles to the left of your scenery, you're going to be placing it very awkwardly in your maps. So try to get the main frame as close to your map as possible. I'm going to press H to bring up my hierarchy here. And you can see I can double check frame bottom contains bottom, frame top contains top. And if you don't see this, you can go ahead and just click display and display children, and you'll see this just fine. I'm going to click both of my frame top and frame bottom. Select and link both of these to the frame. If I don't select anything and then press H, you can now see that frame contains frame bottom, frame top, and each of those contain the parts of my scenery. This should be the hierarchy for your scenery as well. Obviously, if you're using just one part to your object, you're not using a two-piece object, two-piece scenery, go ahead and use just one frame. You don't need to split it up. But if you're making a multi-part scenery, this is the way you should do it.